Thanks to the MCU, Marvel's own God of Thunder is one of the most popular heroes ever. But was he always as he is now? Today we delve into his amazing story in the comics throughout more than 60 years of constant evolution. Thor officially debuted in Marvel in the 60s, but he had already been in comic books for a couple of decades before. He appeared as a supporting character on Venus number 11, a 1948 anthology from the time the House of Ideas was still known as Timely Comics. This character wasn't Marvel's Thor, just an extra who happened to be inspired by the Norse god. The true Marvel's God of Thunder debuted in 1962, only 2 years after Marvel became, well, Marvel. Thor Odinson, also known as the God of Thunder, also known as the Mightiest Avengers, first appeared in Journey into Mystery number 83. Stan Lee tasked his brother, Larry Lieber, with creating a character that was more powerful than Marvel's best at the time, Hulk and Fantastic Four. The only way of creating a character stronger than the strongest, according to Stan Lee, was to make him a god, and since Greek and Roman gods were too mainstream at this point, Norse mythology seemed like a better fit. With the first draft of Thor's origin story created, Jack Kirby designed the new superhero drawing inspiration from Thomas Bulfinch's Bulfinch's Mythology, a mythology encyclopedia from the 1800s. Journey into Mystery number 83 established the most central elements of Thor's origin story. He was a human doctor named Donald Blake who found a walking stick that transformed into Mjolnir. This enchanted hammer, only available for those worthy, became the key to Thor's abilities as it enabled Donald's transformation into the God of Thunder. Following his debut, Thor starred in around 40 more Journey into Mystery issues. These comics introduced more essential Thor elements, like Jane Foster, Thor's first love interest, and Loki, Thor's adoptive brother and biggest enemy. In the 1963 comic Avengers number 1, he also became a founding member of the Avengers alongside other iconic Marvel heroes like Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. Since he was already a member of such an important team, by Journey into Mystery number 125, it became obvious that Thor was the star of his own show. Thor number 126 was the first issue with Odinson's name on the cover. Whom the gods would destroy established Thor's rivalry against Hercules. Now, almost 60 years later, Marvel Studios has drawn inspiration from their feud, introducing Hercules in the MCU as a future antagonist. Thor's first run in Marvel lasted more than 20 years, and it had different writers. Each of these authors brought something different to the table, making Thor what he is now. One of the biggest changes to the original Thor lore happened in 1968. Up until this year, Thor lived a double life, changing from Dr. Donald Blake to Thor whenever he needed it. But Thor number 159 by Stan Lee changed the character forever. The answer at last revealed that Blake was always Thor, but Odin, his father, had sent him to Earth to learn humility since he was an arrogant godling. This twist established Thor's backstory as a cautionary tale on arrogance, setting worthiness, courage, and especially selflessness as central values for the character from then on. By this point, Thor remained working as a doctor, but now his human identity was just a costume, just like Superman and Clark Kent. By embracing his true identity, Thor started dividing his time between Asgard and Midgard, something he still does. This change opened the door for future writers to focus on Asgardian lore. Following this twist, Asgardian became a central location in Marvel. The next big change in Thor's history took place in the 80s when Walt Simonson introduced Beta Ray Bill. The Corbinite was the first ever Marvel character besides Thor to pick up Mjolnir. This was a shocking surprise for both readers and Thor, although it was solved easily by Odin having Bill his own enchanted weapon. Stormbreaker, the Corbinite's appearance in comics, reminded everyone that Mjolnir can be wielded by anyone worthy, not just Thor. This raised the stakes for the God of Thunder, deepening his need to be worthy, to be powerful. Ironically, during Simonson's run, Thor refused to get another kind of power, the political one. When Odin fell during the battle against Surtur, Odinson refused to become Asgard's new king, again proving his selflessness. Among other stuff that he included in his comics are the Surtur saga, Thor's battle against Hela, and even the time he was transformed into a frog. What's more, Simonson finally separated Thor from Donald Blake's identity for good. With Thor now a full-time hero and separated from Donald Blake, he lost all knowledge of medicine, so he stopped being a doctor. Simonson's wild imagination truly made Thor better. Even now, half a century later, many consider his run on Thor to be the true essence of the character. Now separated from Blake, Thor began a new life, but it didn't take long for him to end up merged to yet a new civilian. This time, it was the architect Eric Masterson. This merge happened during Tom DeFalco's run in the late 80s, and it almost ended Thor's career for good. When he used Life Force to kill Loki, Odin exiled him, leaving Masterson to act like the god of thunder on his own. Eventually, Eric was able to find Thor in his own subconscious, saving him from disappearing forever. By the mid-90s, Thor had gone through one too many identity crises, which actually caused him to lose his sanity for a while. Unfortunately, he had one more civilian identity to go through. Under Dan Jurgens' writing, Thor would take on a secret identity, Jake Olsen, a paramedic who had died during a battle against the Destroyer. Olsen's half became Thor's human side, while Thor was his godlike identity. This division was so crucial that once they got separated by Odin, Thor changed. Without this humanity, Thor was less heroic and more indifferent to mortals. He was so detached from humans that he even attempted to turn Asgardian gods into actual Earth deities. And when it didn't stick, he ruled Earth with an iron fist until he came to his senses. The Church of Thor was a short-lived but shameful passage of this character's history in Marvel. This personality change came to confirm what many suspected already. Odin's banishment, although rough, was a fair punishment that gave Thor empathy towards others. If he hadn't lived as a human for a while, he wouldn't be such a noble hero. Even Thor himself understood this important fact about himself. From this moment on, the character came to cherish his Midgardian side even more than before, and his connection with Earth became one of the most important elements of the character. The King Thor episode also put a stop to Marvel's constant need to turn Thor into the secret identity of a civilian. After 3 different attempts that didn't really stick, Thor became just Thor. By this point is 2004. Dan Jurgens has been writing Thor since 1998, and Thor has been on the shelf pretty much since he debuted. But then things changed. Thor died. Well, sort of. Michael Avon Oeming took over Jurgens' run and ended it with a boom. Ragnarok, a Nordic mythology's version of the apocalypse, in which all Norse deities will perish. This series put Thor against Surtur, a fire giant destined to kick off Ragnarok time and time again until the end of times. Thor didn't solve this with his fists. Instead, he discovered that those who sit above in shadow, a group of gods beyond all gods, had forced Asgard into Ragnarok to feed off the energy of this event. To stop them, he sacrificed his power, ending Ragnarok forever. Asgard was destroyed anyway, but those who sit above in shadow wouldn't hurt anyone else. After all this chaos, the God of Thunder chose to finally rest for a while. As part of the infamous Avengers Disassembled era, in which things got dire for the Avengers, Thor died. But before, the Odin Force congratulated him on his victory, stating that this was Odin's plan for him all along. Then came the longest break in Thor comics ever. The God of Thunder didn't return for a run inside Marvel's continuity for 3 whole years. Instead, Marvel experimented a bit with the character without affecting the canon. For instance, Thor Vikings by Garth Ennis saw the god fight hordes of bloodlust zombies. The comic was a part of the Marvel Max line, so it was allowed to push the rating boundaries in a Thor comic for the first time, including truly gory panels and even sexual violence. Also Thor, Son of Asgard by Akira Yoshida, followed Thor's life before he arrived on Earth as a teenager alongside his friends and future allies, Sif and Balder. This comic adds details on Thor and Loki's rivalry as children, shows Thor's longing to be worthy goes way back, and even explores the hero's relationship with Hela, his sister. These are just a couple of examples of the many great stories that arose at the time. None of them would have been possible without an almost 50-year rich story behind them. By the time he chose to rest, Thor wasn't the character who debuted. He was now a 3-dimensional character with a powerful set of allies, a complex relationship with his family, a rich love life, and most importantly, an inspiring sense of self-worth anchored on his need to help others. This would be crucial for his character development in the future. 2007 arrived, and with it, a whole new era for this hero, Thor Reborn, which lasted until 2010. The God of Thunder reappeared on shelves with a new comic under J. Michael Straczynski, and then Kieran Gillen. He wasn't dead, but in a void, so came back to rebuild Asgard. Thor had a new amazing costume, a renewed will to live, and Mjolnir back in his hand. Straczynski's Thor was more than ever aware of his love for Midgard, so he refounded Asgard as close as he could to Earth, right on Broxton, Oklahoma. Asgard became a small foreign embassy on this land. With Asgard complete again, Thor set out to find all lost Asgardians, including Loki. This villain became its cruelest version under Straczynski's writing, which ended up with the Marvel event Siege, in which Norman Osborn attempted to invade Asgard. This event was the highlight of Thor's return to Marvel. It pitted Thor against Sentry, who became possessed by the Void and killed dozens of heroes. Loki attempted to stop him but died in his hands too, apologizing to Thor for what happened. This turned Thor into a rage. This moment marks a big growth moment for Thor. Although he had gone berserk, at this point in the battle, Thor refused to kill Sentry, but was pushed to do it when the Void took control again. This kind of restraint was rare for Thor, so it showed true maturity. Additionally, it planted the seed for a closer relationship between Thor and Loki, with the god of mischief changing from villain to anti-hero after he was reborn too. It is now 2011, and Thor is back for a Matt Fraction series that runs along fear itself. This event pits all Marvel heroes against Kull Borson, also known as the Serpent and the God of Fear. At the same time, 2011 also marks a big milestone for Thor, his debut in the newly created Marvel Cinematic Universe, which kicked off a surge in popularity for this character. Thor went from being a relatively famous character in comic fandoms to becoming one of the 6 most beloved heroes on the big screen. First comes Thor, and in 2013, Thor: The Dark World. MCU fans agree the first 2 Thor films are quite weak, as the characters are two-dimensional and stale. It wasn't until Thor: Ragnarok that Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth gave the character a new voice. The MCU Thor is a true warrior, but he's also funny to the point of being a class clown. With Waititi and Hemsworth's knack for comedy, this God of Thunder isn't as solemn as in the comics, which is definitely a new look for him.
Brand new, now destroyed. Thank you very much.
While the MCU revamped Thor for the masses, Marvel Comics assigned Jason Aaron to continue his story on paper. Aaron worked on the character for 7 years, starting with Thor: God of Thunder. This 25-issue comic became a cornerstone of Thor's character development. The series pitted him against Gorr, the god butcher. Originally a family man, Gorr lost his family to the famine and the weather, so he grew resentful against the gods that allowed this to happen. When he began murdering gods all over the galaxy, Thor had to find him, and he rightfully stopped him. However, Gorr planted the seed of doubt in Odinson, and then Original Sin confirmed what he feared. Gorr was right to hate gods, as they aren't worthy. This shattered Thor's view of the world and made him incapable of holding Mjolnir, who then called for a new wielder. Jane Foster, Thor's first love on Earth, became the mighty Thor. This turn of events transformed Thor into a title, not a name. In fact, Thor Odinson himself abandoned his name and became simply Odinson. He then began a journey of self-discovery to relearn his value as the unworthy Thor. With this plot twist, Jason Aaron revamped Mjolnir's story too. As it turns out, the hammer holds a sentient god, the god Tempest, who has been trapped in Uru for centuries now. Aaron's run on Thor deconstructed the character, paying attention to the concepts that previous writers deemed central to Thor. So his run was a powerful read from beginning to end. Aaron surely understood the character, which allowed him to make him more complex than he had ever been. The MCU also provided their own take on Aaron's run and Jane Foster's ascent to the role of the mighty Thor in Thor: Love and Thunder. While the film does hit some of the same notes as the comics, the MCU also leaves some of Thor's introspection out of the limited runtime. This leaves more room for the MCU to explore Thor's complexities in future MCU projects. In the comics, this 7-year journey ended with War of the Realms, a fight between Midgard and Svartalfheim that pushed Thor into becoming Allfather himself after Odin stepped down. This was the perfect ending for such a complex run, but it wasn't the end of Thor.
Who put me there?
You know damn well! You know damn well!
In 2020, Donny Cates took control of Thor's story and went even further. With Cates, Thor became the Herald of Thunder after Galactus imbued him with his power cosmic. If Aaron led Thor to reach the biggest achievement of his own story, Cates took things further and reminded the fans that, as a god, Thor is as powerful as some of the biggest cosmic threats in the Marvel Universe. Cates' cosmic series ran for 3 amazing years, ending with an epic fight against Galactus. In 2023, Cates passed Al Ewing the baton for Immortal Thor, the ongoing Thor series in Marvel, which has so far pitted Thor against threats that outclass him. Creatures straight out of cosmic horror movies, and even enchanted comic books that work as a meta-commentary on the hero.
Welcome. Voice activation required.
Thor.
Access denied.
After more than 60 years, Thor has been an arrogant Viking godling, a mighty avenger, a cosmic herald, and even Earth's tyrannical king. This 60-year history also proves that there are many more possibilities for Thor's future. both in the comics and in the MCU.
As Guardians of the Galaxy back together again. Oh, where to first?
What do you think is next for Thor? Which Thor comic storyline are you most excited to see adapted?